All right, we're going to call this to order at about 12:02. All right, welcome everyone. Punkage is out of town or predisposed, so I will chair this meeting. Start off with introductions, and I'll start with myself. I'm David Van Genhoven. I'm an at-large member. I'm sorry I caught you with
That's okay. What else is new? Nancy DeBoer, City of Holland.
Rusty Sly with the Banks Authority Board.
Jim Story, Allegan County Board of Commissioners.
John Clark-Anderson, Allegan County Road Commission.
Ken DeWeer, Fillmore Township.
Joe Bauman, Ottawa County Commissioner.
I'm Doug Gradeville, the auditor to present today.
Chris Brown, I do the county work for Grand Valley.
Kevin
Grand Valley
Kleinster.
too as well, I'm back. Sorry.
Kevin Kleinster, City of Zeeland.
Terry Nienhuis, Holland Township.
Tom Bird, Ottawa Road Commission.
Skip Peters, Park Township.
I'm Steve Boltice, the Executive Director of the MACC.
Okay, thank you. Welcome everyone. We do have some guests here, and I'm going to get to them in a minute, but before we do that, you all do have a copy of the minutes, so I would entertain a motion for the approval of those.
So moved.
I think there were two supports, but
So it's Jim Story who moved it and Skip who supported it.
okay. Any questions, concerns? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much. Okay, we do have a few people. Mr. and Mrs. Query, nice to see you. I've known you guys for a long time. Feels like I'm kind of back home, actually. Yeah. Anything you wish to say? Make comments? You've certainly been a big part of this in the past.
No, it's just always a joy to come back and kind of catch up on what's going on. So thank you for allowing us to be here.
Yeah, our pleasure. Always nice to have you here. Representative Garcia, would you like to make any comments? Welcome, and
Thank you.
appreciate your attendance here.
No, absolutely. I just wanted to stop by and say hello. You guys, I know most of you, you know where to find me if I can ever be of assistance or service. I know occasionally I'll pick up the phone and call when I read something in the paper, or now with my dad on the county commission, he calls me a lot to advocate. So that's a good thing for everyone. So I'm glad to be here today. Thank you for the invitation.
Okay, thank you. And newly elected Representative Lilly, would you like to introduce yourself maybe, or?
Well, I cannot say anything now that Danielle said anything, so that just makes me look bad. So I'm Jim Lilly. I'm representing the 89th District here today. Happy to serve. Looking forward to the opportunity. Have a chance to talk with Tom just a little bit before the meeting today, but the big focus of my next couple of years is going to be working on infrastructure projects of the state and talking to some of my colleagues from around the state about the importance of that. So just talk a little bit about the Governor's Infrastructure Report. To the extent you guys have a chance to read that, I highly recommend it. But otherwise, if I can do anything to help, as Danielle said, you know where to find me. So good deal. Thanks.
Come back to see us. Infrastructure would be a good thing to talk about here. Anybody else in the public would like to make comments?
Amanda
Sorry.
Price. I am now Arlen Meekoff's district director. I took Denny Van Dam's place after he passed in December, so I'll be around, and you all have my contact information, so wonderful to be back at the next meeting.
Nice to have you here, Amanda. Okay. All right. At this point, we're going to move into the presentation of the audit. Mr. Redeveld, I believe you're going to handle that, so.
Thank you. Uh-oh. Is that good? All right. I'm on a leash, so I won't do any dancing or anything today. There we go. Intent today is just to briefly go over the audit report. We were out near the end of November and went through the audit, went through all the financial records and so forth that we needed to be able to form an opinion on the financial statements. Whoop, I hit backwards. And in the financial statement booklet, our opinion is found on page 1. Near the bottom of the page, it says, in our opinion, the statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the MACC. So that's a good, clean opinion, certainly what you hope for when you have an audit. We didn't have any findings or any problems like that. more important than some of the numbers in the financial statements are what's done by the MACC. And on top of page 3 in the financial highlights, it indicates some of the things the MACC does. They facilitated $44.6 million in funding program for state and local roadways. So that's the big number with what you do. I'm just going to run through a few numbers in the financial statements from how little money you spent to actually do all that. But on page 9 of the financial statements, that's where most of this information comes from. This encompasses all of the activity of the MACC, including the MACC holding, which holds the building of the MACC. So this is a big picture overall stuff. So you can see for the last 5 or 6 years, whatever we have there, the unrestricted net position has continued to increase over the years. This year it was up about $71,000, so to a level of almost $1 million. So it's in really good shape. And again, that does include all the assets of the organization. And then just for current year, you can see the transportation and the watershed. That's the two primary activities of the MACC. The expenses compared to the direct or program revenues. So you can see for each department, the transportation and watershed, the revenues are a little less than the expenses. And the difference there is made up by the dues. The dues that the local units pay. So the direct or program revenues are the grant monies that come in. And here's a little historical perspective on that same information, all the revenues. You can see the grants fluctuate up and down depending on which grants come in. Primarily this year the watershed grants were up a little bit, but you can see for the last 5 years running, and even older than that, the watershed dues in the green and the transportation dues in the dark blue have been consistent and with no change over the years. And this is a little different historical perspective on the revenues. And if you look on pages 25 and 26 of the audit book, that's the budget to actual, and this is again the revenues. You can see the transportation grants have remained fairly steady. The watershed grants fluctuate more up and down, and again the local in the dark blue stays the same. But on page 25 and 26 gives you a budget to actual perspective of each of the transportation and watershed. Everything is within budget. Both of them finished better than budget, both the watershed and transportation. So ahead of budget. There were no over expenditures that we were required to report to the state. So it's a good, clean audit, and I didn't have any issues to report. We did issue a separate 2-page letter, which was in front of you on the table this morning. That's mostly just canned informational kind of stuff. If we had any minor management letter comments, they would be included in there, but there were none to report. So a very clean, very good audit. Chris did a great job. Steve does a great job, and didn't have any issues. Any questions I can answer, I'd be happy to.
Thank you very much. Oh, nope, there's a question.
You do work for other MPOs,
Yes, we do have Grand Valley Metro Council as well.
and you're impressed with how much we get done with how little money?
Of course.
That's
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
We appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I'm going to turn to Steve for just a second here to make some comments, but certainly looking at an audit, a thank you to you and your staff, because it takes a team effort to do this. So thank you, Steve, and appreciate the good work. So.
Well, certainly, and I want to turn right around and pass that appreciation along to Chris Brown, our finance manager. Typically, this is the only meeting of the year that you see Chris at, but I think it's important for him to be here, not only to help answer any questions you might have regarding the audit, but also to receive our appreciation. He's the one that really makes sure that all the accounting work gets done in a timely and professional manner so that we can have the kind of outcome that you just heard today. So, Chris, thank you very much for all your efforts.
Okay, I would entertain a motion to accept the audit.
So moved.
Thank you, Tom. Second? Questions, comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you very much. Okay, Steve, if you would introduce our next guest, that would be helpful.
Yeah, as the agenda indicates, we have Patrick Moran here today from the Greater Ottawa United Way. Patrick was extended an invitation to join us to talk about an effort that is being spearheaded by the United Way called Ottawa Housing Next. And actually, this came about as a request from Mayor DeBoer at a meeting a couple months ago. The City of Holland, I think some of their neighborhood and Community Services Committee, do I got the name of that committee correct? Has had an ongoing dialogue around housing issues, and particularly housing that is affordable for various segments of our community. And I think from that committee's perspective, and I believe I'm speaking on behalf of her colleagues on City Council as well, is they've kind of taken a look at this and said, this is really a regional issue, and certainly has regional implications. If we are, and you'll hear in the presentation that we're lacking the number of needed housing units that are accessible to all members of our community, and so there's a regional impact as well as a regional way to approach this as well. So we certainly want to thank her for bringing this issue to the group's attention. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add, or if we can just let Patrick begin.
We appreciate Patrick's work and the whole area's work to address the issue, to point out what is the problem so that we can collectively figure out how can we address it. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you.
And that's really what we're here for today, is to talk about first the data behind the issue, and then some of the things we've done. I like, Steve, that you said we're spearheading it. We're really just acting as the backbone for a community collaborative, which means that you're a part of this whether you like it or not, because it is a community problem that's going to be solved by the community. Just as a note, a fun note, I am on a leash today. I'm also a wanderer when I talk, so make sure that camera is rolling for when I go just too far and my feet go out from under me, and that's likely to happen in the next 20 minutes. Also wanted to let you know that as of a week ago, Ottawa County United Way is in a service agreement with the Allegan County United Way, so that we are operating kind of as a back office together, and then we're supervising the work that their staff does. So in the future, we'll have all of Allegan's data able to be into this kind of data, but for today, we had to add some of the Allegan pieces to the Ottawa data, because up until last week, my line was drawn at the edge of Ottawa County. So we'll address that a little bit. I do get to spend half of my time going around giving great stories of how to engage in the wonderful work we do. The other half is spent telling you how bad things are. Unfortunately, today is the how bad things are. So when I saw these two leave, I thought it's because they knew what was coming, and then I realized they were the auditors. So that's okay. When I got into this industry, you'll tell from my accent, I'm not originally from Holland. I'm actually from Grand Haven. And what? Thank you. I have that on camera. They laughed on camera, Lynn. See that? When I got into this industry, we talked about the housing issue in our community. And when the data came out from our recent ALICE study, we started calling it the housing crisis, because I really do believe that it's not an issue anymore. It's a crisis that if we don't solve for it, it's going to spin out of control. And the data might say that we're already spinning a little bit. So let's get into the data. For about 20 years, United Way has done a community assessment every 3 years. Then the Worldwide United Way came out with this idea that we need deeper data on a community level. We had a lot of countywide data, we got a lot of statewide data, we got a lot of MSA type data. But for the work we do, we really needed to get into the community, into the municipality level. The average of Ferrysburg, Coopersville, Holland, and New Orleans for the poverty level doesn't really work that well. We have to get into our own communities. So what the Worldwide did through the state associations is hired Rutgers University to come in and do real deep data in the community that compared what people are earning in a community compared to what it costs them to live in that community. Because the poverty level doesn't really get at that. It doesn't talk about the livable wage. It doesn't talk about what if I've got 2 kids in childcare and you're a single person. So that's what Alice did, and it came in with a concept that said, let's look at asset limited, income constrained, employed individuals. So the interesting thing to note for all the data we're talking about here, the data is for employed individuals. We're not talking about the chronically homeless with no jobs or people that are surviving in other ways, but these are people working in our community trying to make ends meet. Alice, therefore, the Alice threshold, is what it costs that person to live in the community. So if you're living below the Alice threshold, you're receiving supports of some kind to help you stay in our community. So that's poverty plus Alice equals about 32,000 households in Ottawa County, and we'll talk about that merged data in a little while when we add some of the MACC area. So 34% of our population lives below that Alice threshold. That's important to note because only 9% are in poverty. So when we say, oh, it's only 9% in poverty, that's great compared to other communities. When we add Alice to that, it's a third of the population that struggle every month to afford to live in our communities. In fact, there's a data point in our study that shows 49.8% of the people, which I'm a rounder, so that's half, or half if I'm from West Michigan. So half of the people in our community struggle for living expenses for housing every month of the year. 12 months out of 12. 49.8% of the population. Here is Alice broken out by community, because again, averages don't help us much. You'll notice that in every city, the percentages are higher because there's a concentrated rental population in the cities, and in every township the population is lower. In this area here, southwest Ottawa County, we have both the highest percent living below the Alice threshold and the second lowest percent living below the Alice threshold. That's Zeeland City to Park Township. Now the numbers are different because we know the numbers of people living in the city of Zeeland are less. But as a percentage, cities are always worse off. So somebody asked me to use that in a sentence last week, so here's the sentence and how that works. 47% of the people living in the city of Zeeland don't earn enough to live there without support. Here is it broken down into numbers of population. We added Laketown Township to this data because it wasn't in there before. We added that just a couple of days ago. Now, a lot of times when we go out to donors, they say, surely it's not that numbers. I don't see that many people on the corner with street signs. And my answer is, it's because they're at work. They're out at their job earning their money, but when they come home, they need some form of social service or state or federal support or church support or something to get the gap between what they're earning and that livable wage. And in all of those things, housing is an issue because you can't normally negotiate your rent or your mortgage. You might be able to go to a food pantry to get food, you might qualify for subsidized childcare, but it's not often you can call your landlord and say, can I pay $500 this month? And we'll just catch up on another time. So it's one of those non-negotiables. Between the two counties, Allegan County has an affordability index of 55 compared to Ottawa County's 52. Let me expand on this for a moment. There are 3 indices inside of Alice. This is just a scratch of the surface of the data. There are 3 indices. A job opportunities index. We're in the top 3 in the state of Michigan in this county for that. Top 3. There's a community support index. They've got all these complicated things that they put into that. We're the best in the state for community support. But in housing affordability, we're in the middle of the pack, about 40th, which means about 40 other counties do a better job of providing affordable housing to their community than we do. 0 is nobody can afford to live here. 100 is everybody can afford to live here. So we're used to being at the top of the pile. We're used to being the happiest, the healthiest, the best jobs, the lowest rate of unemployment, all of those things. We're used to being the best. But in this index, we're smack bang in the middle and beat by some very surprising counties. We work with 211 a lot on information and referral. Up until about 5 years ago, 211's number 1 request from this community was food support. And it had been food support since I've been looking at this data, since long before 211 was called 211. About 5 years ago, housing became the number one service request and has been the number one request ever since. It's also a data point they track for us is what can't we help with? Somebody called for this, but we got nothing to give them, and we have to send them away empty-handed. Housing is also the number one unmet need, that people call for it, but there's nothing to tell them. They don't qualify for any assistance. So we ask at United Way questions like, well, how does this happen? Why does this happen? It's a wonderful community. We knock all of our issues out of the park. Why is this happening? And in our community over the last 20 years, mortgages have gone up 19.5%, rent has gone up 22.5%, and median income has gone up 3.7%. So you don't need to be a PhD from Rutgers to look at that math. That is unsustainable if you're in that population. In fact, the lowest 2 quintiles of income, if we look at the 5 quintiles of income, the lowest 2 income sections have seen no growth in income in real dollars since before I was born. In the 60s. That's all we're going to say about that, in the 60s. So it was the early 60s, the last time people in the lowest 2 quintiles of income in this community had more spendable dollars than they have today. So now we know why this has happened. We've just kind of let it creep up on us. If you're a renter in Ottawa County, 74% of those renters live below the ALICE threshold. They're not earning enough to live in the communities that they're in. 41% of them live in extreme housing burden. Now, ALICE defines that a little differently than the federal government because we believe in local data instead of national data. But that means that 41% of the people spend 35 to 40 or more percent of their income on housing, leaving very little left over for the other things in their world. When we were looking at the number of units short, I'm looking at some of our partners when I say this, we'd looked at some anecdotal data. How many units do you think we're short? And a couple of our partners, some here, Good Sam included, said, oh, we might be, or somebody else had said, we might be 5,000 units short. And we all went, that can't be true. That's way too many. And when the ALICE study came into the municipalities, they came up with the number of 8,191. So we were right in one way. It's not 5,000, it's 8. Now, what I say about this, my thought process for this is the United Way, agencies in the community that work on housing, all of the people that are supporting housing, they're doing phenomenal work, really great work. They're running down that treadmill at 3 miles an hour, but the treadmill's going 5. So no matter how much we tell you partners are doing brilliant work, it's not at scale that we need to be at. I looked at the 2020 census projection, and it was 319,000 for the 2020 census projection for Ottawa County. In the 2010 census, it was 269,000. So look at that gap and think that approximately 35% of that population will be in that ALICE population and will need housing. If you look at home, what's that? Well, there's a company that tracks home starts by week and by quarter. And if you look at that for the first quarter of last year, they had 422 housing starts for rentals in Ottawa County. And I thought, wow, how fantastic is that? And then we read that 94% of that was for Grand Valley students. So that we're building it looks good on paper that we're building these units, but 94% of the housing starts for rentals were for students. And when you go deeper into that, they're renting those for $600 per bedroom or $1,500 per month. It's student housing. It's like a dorm. It's a really nice dorm, but it's like a dorm. So this is the worst slide I've ever put up in 20 years of presenting in public. It is not for you to read, it's for me to talk about. So this slide right here comes from an MIT living wage study about Ottawa County. So this is county-wide numbers for Ottawa. And it talks about what different industries, what different occupation levels will earn. This may have been handed out in your packet, but it was alphabetized, and this one is sorted by dollar amount. So let's look at a single adult. My son is 20, he's graduating from college next year, and I'm really hoping that he comes back to the community and gets a job towards the bottom end of the scale, because if he's at the top end of the scale, he's going to be at survivability. So the survivability budget from ALICE for an individual who's a single adult in Ottawa County is $18,269. The good news about that is obvious. It looks like whatever industry they're working in, as long as they're full-time, they'll be able to live here. But remember, we're talking survivability. That is food and shelter and transportation to work. That's pretty much it. It doesn't include savings. It doesn't include any of the things that we live in West Michigan for. It's just survivability. If you look at two adults, that classic married or joint couple, that are their survivability budget is $24,000. Again, they're going to probably be okay if they can find housing, because cost isn't the only issue we have. Stock is another issue, that there isn't enough housing around. But when we start throwing in families, either single parent families or double income families with 2 kids, especially in childcare, the numbers start to spread, where they have to be pretty much down towards the higher end of the income levels for jobs in Ottawa County to be able to survive. So a single parent family with 1 kid in childcare needs to earn $32,820 to survive. They need to earn $60,000 to thrive. Now, thriving budget is all of the other stuff we wish we had. A proper savings account, college savings, medical expenses paid at full, and a high quality daycare, all of that stuff. Survivability is just food and shelter, that we're just getting by. So that single parent family needs to earn $32,820, which puts them right into here. It takes out just under half of the jobs that are around. In fact, I don't know the science behind this, but our researchers did a scrape with Michigan Works of all of the jobs available at a point in time in our community. And over 90% of the jobs available on that day, we just picked a day and did it, it was random, 90% of them paid between minimum wage and $14 an hour, which is below that survivability wage. So they're employed, there's jobs available, but they're not matching the family type and the cost of living for each community across the board. Now the good news, because I don't want to be a downer all day long, is that 65% of our population can afford to live here. And that beats a lot of our peers. That beats a lot of other counties that we compete with as a United Way. That's great news. It's just that we don't seem to be okay with the fact that the other 35% need help. We need to do something about that. That's too big a number. So I'm going to introduce you to a few people. Alice here, meet Alice. This person's a high school graduate, 26 years old, single and has low debt, hasn't accumulated a lot of debt, works in building maintenance, which in Ottawa County will pay an average salary of $23,000. Their survivability range is $18,000. But so as long as they don't have a major medical issue, or as long as they don't have a major repair on their vehicle, and as long as they can find that affordable housing, which we know stock is an issue, they're going to be okay. But they have no savings, low ability to access higher health care, and also they are competing heavily for a rental unit or a house in their price range. This Alice is a married couple with 2 kids. They're in their 30s. They're both high school graduates. They finished high school on time and with good grades. They've got a kid in childcare and one at school. One of them works in manufacturing, the other's in the food service. They have an average household salary of $52,340. I remember in the days when $52,000 sounded like a lot of money for a household. But the survivability budget for that particular family in our community is $53,000. So right off the bat, they're making it, within literally $700 they're making it, but there's no space for anything. If the food service person has to stay home with a sick child or get sick themselves, that week they're behind. So there's no room for any of those unexpected things. You get a $200 car repair, you either don't make the repair or you find alternative transportation to work and childcare. And I put this one in red for a reason, because we have a bunch of single parent families in Ottawa County and Allegan County. A single parent with 2 kids in their 30s with a degree, this is a degreed individual, works in the healthcare field, not as a doctor, but in that healthcare field as an aide or a support person, and they earn $31,564. Their survivability rate is $36,000, so they're way behind to start with, which just means that they're never going to be able to get ahead on that. That's just survivability. In fact, in Ottawa County and Allegan County, if you're a single parent family with kids under 5, 49% of that population lives in actual poverty. which is way below this ALICE threshold. Remember, poverty's here, the ALICE threshold is here. So 49% of that population lives in actual poverty. So that's the bad news. Welcome. I hope your lunch is digesting. So here's what we're trying to do about it as a community. And remember that we've been working on housing as a community, partners and people in the community for a long time. And we've done some great work. We had, through Spoke and United Way, we had some community conversations. And in those community conversations, they identified a need for this cross-sector long-term regional strategy that promotes long-term accessible, affordable, safe housing. We can't just keep going at the pace we're going because we're falling farther behind even though we're doing great work. They identified stock as an issue. We need more brick and mortar or whatever we build out of now. We need the cost to go down for current units. We need to work on income so people aren't always living below the ALICE threshold and needing help. We want to get them above the ALICE threshold. We want to work on public policy to change some thought processes and some stigma and some legal things that might need to change to do some of the work they want to do. And we know that if we build it, they might come, but that doesn't solve the problem all the time. We need long-term supportive services after that. So they identified these 5 leverage points and said, let's get to work on those 5 leverage points. What they did was they created, I say they, it's a community thing that United Way is backboning. So we're the backbone for it, but the community put 5 groups together, which a couple of them have merged and transitioned into other things. And they're working on things like housing case management, creating projects that will actually build, leveraging the money into those building projects so we can go to scale. Working on things like a GIS map so we can know exactly where to build. Working with employers to say, here's an interesting idea. At some point, somebody said healthcare should be a benefit for work. Not technically connected, but let's make that happen. Why not housing? Why is housing not a work benefit, just like healthcare is, or vacation, or some of those kind of things? I'm going to stick a pin in it for a minute and say that one of the things that came out of this group was education of senior leaders in business. So partners of United Way and United Way itself has been going on tour to the #1 leader in big ALICE employers. You could fill in the blanks of the people that we've been to see. And we've sat down with them and explained the data. We've talked about what's going on in our community. And for the first time in my history, I've really seen the penny drop. In fact, I had one CO say, Joan is Alice, and pointed out to his receptionist. Realizing that the people that they are employing are the people that we're talking about, and for the first time ever, that housing is getting in the way of the bottom line. Because they cannot bring quality workers and keep quality workers at the scale they want to keep them, housing is now an economic development issue, whereas we always thought it was a social service issue. It's really getting in the way. And we invited 3 individuals to come today who run businesses in our community, family-owned businesses, and they all said they would love to do that, but they were physically traveling. They were gone, which is part of the problem with these busy people. But we're working with them on getting letters of support so that municipalities can see that the businesses are really behind this idea. When I say MACC supplied questions, when we met with your Services Delivery Committee, that's the correct name, I believe, Services Delivery Committee, they asked some questions and these were the answers to those. One of the things they said about is, what are you doing about it? How do you know where to go? We're working on a GIS map and expanding the target market analysis that was done in the City of Holland across the region. What that GIS map will do is give us the toggles that we can say, if we were going to build or add supportive services, if we were going to build properties for the ALICE population, if we were going to expand and renovate properties in the rental market, where would be the best place to do that based on schools, transportation lines, and employers that employ those people? Kind of baseline data that you'd think we would know, but we only know it anecdotally. We don't have that toggle that we can click these 5 things on the map and have the scatter plots pop up. Turns out that stuff costs money. So United Way's already putting a fair amount of money into the project. Right now, our Housing Initiative Fund has $262,000 a year that we push out. So we're looking for partners to help us do that. I'm going to turn to Lynn because the number changes every day. What's the total project cost?
21,000.
And we're at 10?
11.
We're at 11,000 right now. So we're just over halfway of raising the money to do this. But it would help a lot of our partners in the work that they do to have this MACC. The MACC district expands into both counties, and just to confuse issues, in the last week that I've been working with Allegan County United Way, they have a MACC too, the Multi-Area Coordinating Council. That took me at least 2 days to sort out. Which meeting I'm going to, because I meet that MACC next week, so I'm voting we change their name to something else. I'm sure you've said the same thing. Anyone here serve on that MACC? I need help because I can't get them straight on my calendar. So.
Your calendar.
Yeah. We should just carpool. So the data I'm going to give you now has left the realm of statistical significance. We have not done any testing on this data. These are extrapolations based on the good data, trying to get into the MACC area instead of Allegan County and Ottawa County. So we've done the work on this. That's my disclaimer, so you don't print it in the newspaper and say he got that wrong by 100. We're 8,191 affordable rental units short in Ottawa, which is a 40% increase needed over the current number of rental units. And it's been creeping that way for years. That's why the number's so big. It's just been getting there year after year after year. We're 734 affordable rental units short in Allegan, which is an 8% increase over the current need of rental units. Better, but given that census data that we've looked at for both, it just means that they're heading that way in Allegan, just like we did in Ottawa. We need to get ahead of that curve while it's still only 8% growth needed. The MACC area conservatively suggests, the data suggests that we're 2,000 units short of affordability for the area that Steve outlined for me that you serve in the MACC. Again, that's not a statistically significant number, but a pretty good projection on very solid data. Now, somebody said, well, you'll never be able to build 2,000 units. We're not talking about building 2,000 units. We do have some stock that we have to build. We do have some costs that we have to lower. We have to increase income of individuals in this population by helping them, and we have to create income supports so that the money that they do have goes further. One of those things, all of those things are necessary. None of them on their own are sufficient. It has to be pushing on all of those different leverage points. 18% of homeowners, so we're off rentals now talking about homeowners, 18% of homeowners in Allegan pay more than 35% of their income to housing. That puts them in extreme housing burden according to Alice. And 15% of homeowners in Ottawa do the same thing. It is suggested through the extrapolation of this data that more than 5,000 homeowners need support in your area to be able to afford all of the things in their world, including their housing, on their own. Somebody at the Service Delivery Council asked, is this a stock issue, a cost issue, an income issue, or something else? And of course the answer is yes. Yeah, we truly believe through the work that our partners have done and the work that we've done at United Way that we must push each one of those levers independently so that together it makes a difference. If you try and build 8,000 units, we're going to struggle. If we try and just make 8,000 more affordable, we're going to struggle. If we build them and then ignore them for the next 20 years, we're going to struggle again. We've got to do all pieces of that puzzle. What's being done in the other three quadrants? And that was a question because our county for United Way is broken up into other quadrants, including the northwest quadrant of Ottawa County, the northeast quadrant, and the southeast quadrant. We've done case management, or when I say we, I'm talking about a community response, not United Way necessarily. We've done a case management enhancements. We've created that initiative fund that spreads money across the county. $260,000 is a grain of sand, but it's a start. We're working on the mapping project, and we've got some partners that are working on building projects that we're trying to provide resources, both in the way of mapping and money for. So the work is being done in the rest of the Ottawa County as well, and there's some work being done in the rest of Allegan County, but we know that the numbers are worse in the Holland-Zeeland area because the population is bigger in the Holland-Zeeland area than it is up north and in some places down south. It's just that there's more concentrated population. So as a percentage, they might be equal, but the number is worse. So a lot of the work that we're piloting is in the Holland-Zeeland area, even though we will spread it across the county as we go. So, again, most of my day is spent engaging you into the work that we do and getting really excited about it. So that last 30 minutes was not that. But you have to have a baseline. You have to understand what's going on in the community before you can create a coordinated response. So we invite you to be a part of the solution, as I know you want to be. You can throw money at me. It's great. I love that too. You can throw other resources. You can throw support. You can throw questions. What we're asking is that you be a part of it, as some of you already are. I was just kidding. No questions. No, go ahead.
Could you explain once again that the difference between you got 8191 rental units short
Yep.
and the 2,000 number that you
So 8191 is the county of Ottawa,
Okay.
the whole thing. And the 2000 extrapolation was trying to get into just the MACC area as defined by Steve for us. Yeah, we as a United Way, we just don't work in that particular line. So all of our data has been segmented and we had to do some magic to try and come up with a MACC number.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Patrick, you had mentioned the student housing
Yes.
at Grand Valley. How did you put that into the total?
So
did you look at them as regular earner households, or did you kind of try to keep those separate?
yeah, they're a pesky population. I've got one of those at home. Well, he's not at home, but you know what I mean. They're a pesky population because they skew our data enormously. They're incredibly healthy and incredibly poor. So the data gets very skewed. So what we've done in the United Ways assessment in general is we have created, instead of having 4 quadrants of the county, we now have quintrants. Not sure that's a word, don't put that in the newspaper. We pulled out that central segment that is Allendale town because it's full of students. But in the Alice data, it does not pull them out. That's why we went in and said, so how many of the housing starts in near GVSU? We just kind of knew, right? So we went in and looked at it, and although those 442 units started for rentals, more than 90% of them were right there for students. So that, if somebody comes out and says, oh, we quadrupled the number of housing starts for rentals in Ottawa County, there's a big yes, but. Yes, but that's being paid for from student loans, and they're inordinately expensive. I never realized how much they're charging for student housing now. Way above market.
Patrick, the data you used for the community assessments from 2012, and I'm just wondering if you've updated that, because it's right after the recession.
Yep.
A lot of jobs are gone.
So the Alice data, the United Way assessments gets redone every 3 years, and we've got the 2015 one out. The Alice refresh comes out in April of this year. It comes out in 2 months. And one thing I'll tell you is I have the joy of serving on the planning committee for Alice in Michigan. We do it statewide. And next year I get to be the chair, which means I get to tell them what we'd like to change. So if there's data, and we've been collecting these questions, if there's data that you say, I wish we could know this, then we actually have a direct pipeline into adjusting how we do Alice. And we've done some really great tweaks to the data. Here's the trouble. The American Community Services, the American Community Survey, which is inside of our data, is now no longer done every 3 years for Ottawa County. So the census has changed the way it does some of its reporting and bumped it to 5 years. So we have to do some magic, because what good is 5-year data to us? It's great in 5 years. It's no good for the next 5 years. So that's an issue we have to solve for in that some of the data points in there are now not being done for us in a timely manner. And the MSA messes with it too, the statistical areas that have adjusted in the last couple of years. So yes, there's an update coming. It's not going to be as current as I wish it was. This data stuff makes my head spin.
But Patrick, one of the 5 is public policy. What is your dream public policy?
I'm sorry, who had a question? I couldn't tell you that I have a dream public policy. I can tell you that there's a committee working through Ottawa Housing Next to say what is the role of policy in this. And I might actually take the time right now to remind everybody I'm not a housing expert. I just have the clicker. But Lynn might have an answer to that.
I'm so sorry. I was clarifying something with Amanda and I did not hear the question.
Well, the question was a really hard one. What's Patrick's perfect public policy related to this? And I said, well, we're doing some work in the committee. So what is the committee looking at in the public policy realm?
Well, I think just to be very general about it, we'd like to look at how municipalities can incentivize affordable housing. We're very limited in Michigan in the incentives we can provide, which most of you, I'm sure, already know. So that's our main topic, is just to think about how do I incentivize affordable housing through public policy.
That's why Lynn comes with me to these things. It's really, how do you be a part of the solution, right? Nobody wants to build high-rises and drop the lowest income community members into it and leave them alone. But we have to solve this problem if we want to have a prosperous community across the board.
So what are you really talking about when you say 2,000 living units in our 10 townships? What does that really relate to? There's not 2,000 people out there that would actually occupy those, right? Or
there are 2,000 households right now that are living only on the support of the community to pay that rate. So the rate of a place that they're already in has to go down. It's a real shame, but it's a true statement that an awful lot of our people are doubled up. So families living doubled up. So here's the word affordable. If my family of 4 moves in with your family of 2, I now have affordable housing. But it's not appropriate housing for that family. That would be 4 kids and 4 adults living in a 2-bedroom apartment. So we have to get recrafting the idea of affordable housing into appropriate workplace housing. That a family of 6 isn't in a 1-bedroom. Or worse, that a family of 6 doesn't chase the rent into 4 different places this year. When we talk to our schools, I presented to the superintendents yesterday, when we talk to our schools and they give us the numbers of how many of their kids cycle in and out of the school in a year, and when they were talking about 1/3 of their population cycles every year, we can't get good schooling when the kid's moving 3 times a year into different schools. And of course our employers are saying that we're not giving out the kind of staff that they need. So it's all connected to this housing as a leverage point, not as the sole issue, but as a leverage point. So build some more income supports to make some more affordable, and then more appropriate stock so that everybody can have the appropriate living space for their family.
So, Patrick, the developers, how are you approaching the developer community? Because we have a housing market that's accelerating right now, and it's a profitable housing market. How do you talk a developer into, or a property management company, into putting together housing that is affordable in this market?
So there are ways to make it more affordable. There are tax credits, there's payments in lieu of taxes, there's Federal Home Loan Bank, and again, I look over at the experts for all of these acronyms that I don't really fully understand how they work. There are methods to make it more affordable, but the actual stick-built cost of building a home now on the lot in a community where they need to work is not a model that will work for that affordable. You can't turn around and then sell that for $80,000 when the lot cost $40 or $50. And you can't turn around and rent it for $650 a month when your nut on it is $1,000. So it's not really a market that the developers are competing for, because the math doesn't work. So I think you just volunteered for one of my panels. That sounded like volunteerism to me, to come on and help us solve for that. One of the ways to do it is to consider that if nobody's competing for this population, is there a nonprofit model where nonprofits could be the developer? You know, I used to work for the YMCA, and a lot of people would argue that the YMCA is unfairly competing with fitness clubs because they offer fitness. And there was a kernel of truth to that. Nobody's competing for this housing market. Nobody is trying to build 8,000 units at a loss. Otherwise, they'd be in the Alice population. So it's one of those things, we've let it creep out of control. Through no fault of anybody's, really. It's just kind of all of these things have come up. Minimum wage went up. It will make no difference functionally to the daily expenses and the daily incomes of individuals at minimum wage. It would have had to gone up to something crazy, which then drives the cost of goods, and everything just keeps going along.
I think they also have to legislate to help the landlords have a few more rights. Right now, most of the rights go to the tenant, and the landlord gets stuck. And you said people moving out. A lot of these people know how to work the system.
Chasing the rents.
And they chase the rents. They don't pay it. They live there for free for a couple months, move to the next one, and the landlord gets stuck. So I think the legislature has to pass some laws to help the landlords out.
And we've been doing some surveys, landlord surveys and tenant surveys, to try and get to the, you know, what are they really thinking? What's really going on? We know there's stigma and we know there's issues. So how do we make it good for the landlord, good for the tenant, and in a system that the only way they can get by is to chase that, right? Is to chase the system. How do we change the system so that they don't have to do that anymore? It's a tough situation to be in, to be in that Alice population. And we've had some pushback on we have a survivability budget and we have a thriving budget. And as the family grows, the thriving budget goes through the roof. So I've got a high schooler and a kid in college now, and I've never earned so much and felt so poor as I do today. My wife is a full-time employee at the top of her career. I've got a good job, and it's like, seriously, we were better off when we were 25. Because it's so expensive to thrive in the world now. But you got to remember, we're talking mostly about survivability budgets. The gap between surviving and thriving is another X, and it's all in the deeper report. I don't want to monopolize your time, but I really do. So I'm going to let you ask questions until Steve gets the hook out.
This guy's got the gavel.
Patrick, that was really well done. Serious subject, handled very nicely. So, having been here nearly 30 years, I can't call it shocking, but I would call it highly interesting, highly relevant. So I'm sure this group will be dealing with it. It sounds to me like you presented the information. There's not exactly an easy solution to this, but you presented the information very well.
We've got to be in it together. Thanks.
Steve, you met with the Service Delivery Committee, and
That's right. As Patrick alluded to in his presentation, this presentation was also given to the Service Delivery Committee, and actually we had the benefit of his presentation then in a follow-up session last month where we kind of hashed through the issues again, because there is a lot here, and you'll probably have that too. You'll be thinking about this over the course of the next weeks. When we circled back to it and discussed it more at our meeting last week, we kind of came to the realization or conclusion that the committee believes that GIS map that Patrick talked about is an essential step in terms of having the information necessary to really make good decisions moving forward. And I had asked him to send along the proposal so that I could be a little better informed as to what that effort is all about and what it's going to contain, and I would certainly agree with the committee's assessment that it is necessary for us to have that. In order to have that information, it has a lot of flexibility, and you're going to be able to do a lot of different scenario planning. And you know, who knows, if we get it, if it comes to fruition, we may even ask for some of the what are called shape files, the data behind that, and drop them into our own system and do a little more manipulation, maybe on a more customized basis. Possibly, if they're willing to do that. But the committee did come to the conclusion, and I'm bringing forward for your consideration today, it wasn't in the agenda packet because we met after the agenda packet went out, is Patrick mentioned, or Lynn mentioned, that there is a gap in funding to get that effort done. And I'm here on behalf of the Service Delivery Committee to ask you to consider a $2,500 allocation from the MACC towards this effort to get it done. My understanding is that Holland Township has made a $1,000 contribution to it as well. Most of the other units of government weren't aware that they had been asked, but we felt that, as a collective organization of governments, that we should consider doing that to help close that gap, hopefully get that effort completed, because we do see a lot of benefit to it. So I would put that out there for your consideration on behalf of the Service Delivery Committee.
All right, so the way to proceed is we could either take a motion or we can have further discussion about that, either one.
There is funding in the budget. It would come from the consulting line item under the indirect.
I would like to make that motion that the MACC donate or give $2,500 to Housing Next. Is it Housing Next that would give it?
Yeah, and I failed to mention the Lakeshore Housing Alliance, which I don't know exactly. I talked about the United Way, but I really didn't speak to that. If you want to just quickly mention the Lakeshore Housing Alliance, who they are and how they're engaged in this effort.
Sure. Part of the $262,000 that we currently invest every year goes to operate the Lakeshore Housing Alliance, of which Lynn is the director. So it's an internal function of United Way right now, because we don't want it ever to go away. It is the continuum of care for our community. It does the homeless management information system. It gets over $1 million in Fed and MISHTA grants right now. So a pretty good investment for us to be able to keep that going. And that's where the money would go, is into that pot and then straight out to whoever it is that we're paying. Yeah. She's got a proposal sitting on her table. We could pull the trigger if we had the money.
Support that motion.
Okay. Motion, support. Questions, discussion, or concerns about that? Pat?
This brings up a topic we've discussed before relative to the limited purpose of an MPO administering federal funds and our dues as a transportation partner going towards support of the MACC's operation, and the potential conflict of using the MACC's funds for, which includes dues paid by the transportation partners for projects that, worthwhile as they may be, have nothing to do with transportation. So I have an issue I'm wrestling with in my own mind in terms of my ability to support such an expenditure. But there's also the issue that under the current rules, I might not have the right to vote on that issue as a transportation partner, and unless and until we do something to amend our bylaws, I would be abstaining on this particular motion.
Understood and appreciated. Yes, sir. Understand as well. Any other questions? Nancy?
What is the mission statement for MACC?
To encourage collaboration among neighboring units of government on issues of area-wide concern.
So it's not only and always transportation.
Right.
Areas of concern.
Yeah, I mean,
The bylaws state social issues. I mean, that's a broad term, but there's certain social issues that are social concerns that come up that I would say this one certainly falls within that description.
Yeah. There are issues that if they don't go to us, where do they go? If you want to talk regionally, right? And if not now, then when? I guess is a conundrum.
Yeah, the bylaws do speak to Tom's point. They also speak to the point that the MACC was created, and it was its founders certainly envisioned. I mean, that's why social issues, housing actually is listed specifically, as well as issues of the environment and so forth. I mean, that's the umbrella under which we got involved with the watershed project.
What percentage of our money would you say is in the transportation area as an organization?
So if you look, at a financial statement or our audit, there's a considerable amount. I mean, of the, we're at about $1 million right now, and it's, well, with the incentive, the revenues that are provided to farmers for incentive payments. I mean, right now, it's what, about 60-40 transportation and other.
Jim?
What area will this map cover? This is for the GIS map, correct?
It is. Going to pass that to Lynn. It's a county-wide map.
So it's not the entire MAC area?
Oh, it does not include Allegan County currently.
So when I spoke to doing some customization, so this is a dilemma the MAC lives with, right? So we cross a county border, and so if this effort goes forward, then we'd ask for those and add the Allegan data to it so that we can look at it from a MAC perspective.
It would include Allegan County, the portion of Allegan County that's the city of Holland, that includes the city of Holland. But I can ask them to include that and add that to the proposal.
But, yeah, please. Will it include Fillmore and Laketown? That's my question.
I can ask them to include those in the proposal. And there'll be an extra cost.
I think it should.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, and I was thinking it may be cheaper for us to do it ourselves, potentially. At least I'd like to explore, doing it in-house versus having them do it. Might be easier for them to do it. Might be easier for us to do it. But we would certainly need that for our. But this is not unusual for us to run into things that are county data sets. And we just need a sub part, actually, both counties, actually.
I guess I don't understand the answer. Will it include the Allegan County units that are in the MAC?
So currently it does not. So Lynn can go back and modify her proposal, or, as I had mentioned earlier, if the effort happens and we get the data, then MAC staff would do that. We would add in Fillmore and
It's just a suggestion. Just modify the motion to include that area of Allegan County. If Kevin's willing to do that.
Did you kind of hear what he said, Kevin?
No, I didn't hear that.
Okay. What he kind of suggested is modify the motion to include Allegan, Fillmore, and Laketown into the motion for the contribution.
So it might read something like then to allocate $2,500 towards the Ottawa Housing Next GIS mapping project, provided it includes Fillmore and Laketown Township. And then I think that leaves it open for that. Then we can work with the Lakeshore Housing Alliance as to how that's going to be done, whether it's done internally or done as part of their project.
Just to clarify, so it would just be including Laketown and Fillmore Townships, adding those two areas to the proposal.
And the Allegan portion of the city of Holland.
Right.
Yeah,
That I think is already
The full MAC area.
Right.
Yes, I would put that in there.
John, is it all right with you?
Nancy.
Yes, that sounds good to me.
Okay. I have been on this a long time, but I can certainly see it draws into question the role of MAC. Having said that, I have to say this was one of the most intriguing presentations I've heard. Really interesting. So I don't want to say I enjoyed it. I found it highly interesting. Any other questions or comments before we? Okay, we'll try a voice vote and see how it goes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we're good. Okay, we are going to turn to watershed, and I believe, Kelly, you are up for that.
All right, and I will keep this fairly brief. I have just kind of a little bit of a teaser update on the green infrastructure project that we're working on. We will describe it in more detail at our watershed meeting this Thursday, which will be here possibly in this same room. I'm not exactly sure what room they have us in on Thursday. But as a kind of a background reminder, this is a project that's being funded by the Community Foundation of the Holland Zeeland area, was awarded to us last fall. And we are basing a green infrastructure suitability map on a study that was done in Berlin, Maryland. We've made some modification to the factors that they used. So this is the list of the suitability factors that we're using. Again, at the meeting on Thursday, I will describe in more detail what specifically about those factors and how we utilize those, but we're looking at soil characteristics, soil hydrologic group, which gets at how quickly does water infiltrate through the soil, slope of the land, proximity to buildings, depth to water table. These were the factors that we felt have an impact on where green infrastructure is suitable in the landscape. So without giving you all the details, here's what our kind of initial take at this looked like, and the colors don't translate great on the screen here, but so essentially kind of combining all those factors together, this was the first map that we came up with. We presented this to our stormwater committee, which has representatives of the 2 counties, 2 road commissions, and the 2 cities that participate in the state stormwater permit program. So they had the first go at this map, and we went over it in detail, and they provided us some feedback on how we can refine this. Because essentially how this map ended up, the green color is high suitability for green infrastructure. So you can see a lot of the urbanized area is green. So we needed to refine that a little bit better. So when we get down on kind of a site scale, we had better than, most of the watershed is a high priority for, or high suitability for green infrastructure. So we took their feedback and we made some modifications. And this is kind of our second round based on the input from the Stormwater Committee. So we made some modifications to the soil characteristics, to the slope, and then we actually eliminated the depth to water table because we don't have a lot of confidence in that data's accuracy. So you can see that more of the area then becomes low suitability, which is the orange. So this does refine the data a little bit more. And then I've cut just kind of to zoom into a kind of a site scale, parcel scale, to see what this looks like. It's very pixely because that's the site or the way that the processing happens. This is all GIS processing. So those are 4-foot cells, 4x4-foot cells. So it's a fairly fine scale in terms of GIS processing. But you can kind of start to see on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis. This is in the Holland Heights area. So 8th Street is up here, and Dartmouth, Cambridge. So you can kind of start to see where this neighborhood here has a lower potential for green infrastructure. Again, the orange is the low potential, yellow, medium, green, high suitability. So if we were going to look at this neighborhood in particular, we would say green infrastructure would be more suitable here than it is in this neighborhood. And so that's what we're hoping to get down to. We may need to do some more refinement of this for this site scale. And ideally what we'd like to do is, instead of having these pixely parcels, is kind of come up with a score for each parcel to indicate its suitability. So either take an average or add these up and put them on a continuum. So we have by parcel is their high, medium, or low potential, or low suitability for green infrastructure placement. So again, that's just a very quick look at that. We'll talk more in detail on Thursday. If you aren't able to make the meeting on Thursday, and I know several of you have emailed me that you cannot, but you're interested in talking more about it, I am certainly happy to come, or Carolyn could come and set up an individual meeting with yourself, with your staff, with your board, with your planning commissioners, whoever you think is appropriate to take a look at this and give us some feedback and help us refine this. But kind of our next steps, again, the first thing, the refinement of this, we'd like to try to wrap that up fairly quickly so we can move on to the next phase. So within the next few weeks. So I will, after the watershed meeting on Thursday, I will send out a reminder to everyone, especially those that haven't been able to participate in the process so far. I know Mayor Kleinstra did join us last week when we had the meeting with the Stormwater Committee. We'd like to give you all the opportunity to find out more about this and comment. So I will, after we get through the meeting on Thursday, I will send out emails individually and see if you're interested in setting something up. Again, kind of on an informal basis. I don't know that we have time to actually go to board meetings and commission meetings, but if we can meet one-on-one, that will be better than nothing. Because then the next piece of this is we want to work to prioritize. It's one thing to say the land is suitable for green infrastructure, but where is it going to make the best benefit on the landscape? So looking at things like land ownership, we feel that it will be much easier to work with public landowners like yourselves than it will be to work with private landowners. Plus, you control larger tracts of land than some private landowners do. And then looking at land classification zoning with just in the private land classifications, commercial and industrial, again, we feel would be easier to work with. They do control more land, larger scale. There's more opportunity because they have space to do green infrastructure. And then other characteristics where there's high impervious surface, where there would be a lot of stormwater runoff, that would be a high priority area for green infrastructure, so we can slow that runoff, contain that stormwater, get it to infiltrate. And then also where we have high pollutant loading. So in work that has been done in the past with the update of the watershed management plan, we do have that data available. Where are our highest percentages of impervious surface? Where is the majority of the pollutant loading, especially the phosphorus coming from in the watershed? So we haven't really done the GIS analysis with this yet, but we'll probably have the suitability superimposed on areas of high priority to then kind of geographically focus in our efforts. Because then the next step will be to turn over this information to a consultant with Kaiser and Associates. And what they're actually going to do is look at our maps and take input from all of you and actually conceptually design 10 or 12 projects. So actually specifically looking at a bioswale could be put on this property, and this is how much it's going to cost. And this is an initial conceptual design of that. So I've offered to the Stormwater Committee, and I will put the offer before you as well. If you have a wish list project of green infrastructure, or you know of an area that you think would be suitable for green infrastructure, let me know. We'll start a list and give it to the consultant to look at, and then he can determine based on our suitability analysis, based on our priorities, does it make sense to put green infrastructure there, and then he'll figure out what would be the best green infrastructure, and then again the cost and benefit related to the services provided by that green infrastructure. So again, I will send out an email and kind of remind you of that, so then you can just respond. And if you just have a location that there's a vacant lot on the corner of this intersection we think would be great, that's good enough. We can add it to a list to take a look at. So we hope to have the consultant's report by the end of June. So the sooner we can give him information, the better. So I'd like to try to wrap up the suitability analysis within the next 2-3 weeks, so we can turn him loose on the next phase and give him adequate time to have us something back by the end of June. And then just a few other components to this project. We have not started yet, but we will be reaching out to the residents in Holland Heights to try to do some focus groups with them, looking at these maps and kind of looking at more neighborhood scale green infrastructure and getting input from the residents on where do they see the needs. Where do they see water pond? Does flooding occur in the neighborhood? And then working with the city to maybe identify some projects specifically in the Holland Heights neighborhood that we can kind of rally the support of the neighbors around, get them involved perhaps in the design and implementation, and maybe even some of the maintenance of that green infrastructure. So we will start doing that this summer, just doing some general outreach with the community, and then hold some focus groups with them later in the fall. And then once we have the Kaiser and Associates report at the end of June that gives us these potential projects, then we will do another round of public presentation and seeking feedback on those results. So we'll probably start that at a policy committee meeting, so then you can see those presentations, and if you feel that your planning commission, your board of trustees would be interested, we can then schedule meetings and kind of make the rounds to those. We'll certainly present it at various watershed meetings. We are also at the same time planning a green infrastructure training seminar. We've got a kind of a core group of people together to help us plan that. It will be held at the Hayworth Inn and Conference Center on August 22, so we do have the facility locked in for the day. We have kind of a rough agenda sketched out, but it will be pretty high level, kind of engineering. How do you engineer green infrastructure? How do you make it work for various site conditions? And we'll have some experts in the field come in to talk about that. So that's shaping up to be a really high caliber program, so we will keep you informed as that progresses. And then we have to have everything wrapped up by December 1st. So I think we're making really great progress right now, and we will certainly meet that deadline. So just a reminder about the watershed meeting again. It's this Thursday at 1:30. It will be here in the community center. So we will spend quite a bit of time looking at that green infrastructure suitability map. And then we are also going to look at the road stream crossing inventory. We have to kind of come up with a plan for how we are going to continue doing road stream crossing inventories. And Carolyn and I have kind of bounced a bunch of ideas back and forth, and we decided that we need people to help us make that decision. So this meeting will be a little bit different this week in that we're actually going to make people that come to the meeting work for us instead of us just standing up and giving presentations. So it'll be more of a work session than just a standard give reports sort of a meeting. So if you're able to come, we would love to have your participation in that. And that's all I have, unless anybody has questions.
Thank you, Kelly. Sorry for the disruption in the beginning. That's what happens when you follow the major program. It's just the way it goes. Okay, we're in the home stretch, and Steve's going to start to take us home with transportation.
Yeah, very briefly, only one agenda item for you today, and that was just to kind of highlight some of the findings or just actually draw attention to the Governor's 21st Century Infrastructure Commission. This was a report that was released recently and has received some conversation. Very good work has been done in this regard, and it's very comprehensive. I mean, when we talk about infrastructure, we tend to talk about it mostly from the perspective of roadways and so forth around this table, but the commission's work went on to look at all types of different infrastructure beyond water pipes and other types of things, as well as transportation. What we included in your agenda packet were some excerpts from the report related to transportation, as Lisa's cover memo indicated here. Beyond roads and bridges, it was very comprehensive, and even within transportation, looking at transit and passenger transportation, freight as well, marine, aviation. There's a look to the future. I mean, the report itself, it has kind of a 50-year planning horizon, so and which is appropriate, right, for infrastructure to have a planning horizon, a time horizon that's multiple decades. And this report did really take that point of view in terms of longevity. I found rather interesting, if you had a chance, again, we just put in some excerpts related to transportation, but the last item there in the cover memo refers to revenue generation options, and we had a chance to look at some of the detail that was included in the agenda packet. When you get to pages 159, 160, and so forth, it starts to talk about some of those items, including local revenue generation options. This is page 160 of those detailed recommendations that were part of the report, where it talks about the Michigan legislature should enact legislation to enable new methods of generating local revenue to increase transportation investment, including but not limited to regional option gasoline tax, impact fees, and so forth, and it goes on and talks about that. So I thought some very interesting items. Of course, Act 51 review, which is right above that local revenue generation option, is mentioned again, and of course that's been discussed in the past. We've had conversation about that around this table in the past as well, but a lot of good information in there. Not enough time to really delve into depth in any part of that, but certainly want to draw attention to it. Metropolitan planning organizations are specifically referenced in several of the recommendations, so we'll be paying attention to those as well. So just wanted to highlight that pretty major initiative recently released, and of course components of it, for local units of government, many components of it. For MPOs, certain components are more relevant than others, but good work, and we should keep our eye on that.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Do you want to make a few comments on administrative issues?
Yep, included in the packet was the basically financial report through December through our first quarter here. Revenues are showing at 30.4%, expenses at 16.7%. It does reflect the budget amendment that was passed recently as well, so took care of a few of those items. We still have a couple of other revenue items that came in that will have to be addressed there in lines 10 and 11 on the report, but be happy to answer any questions you might have regarding those.
Okay. Executive Committee, you want to make any comments on that?
A summary of the last meeting was included in your agenda packet. Be happy to answer any questions regarding that.
Mr. Mayor, thank you for hosting us.
Thank you for coming. Last time you were here, I think we were working on this building, expanding our library upstairs. That is completed, and expanded children's section, and it turned out very nice. We've got a new room downstairs that replaced the one that was there, so it turned out very nice, and I think around budget, which is always good. Our clean water plant is continuing its expansion. It should be done soon. It's getting there, and that's been a long project, but we see the light at the end of the tunnel with that. Of course, Holland Township and Zeeland Township are going in with us on that, so good effort between the three municipalities. And next spring, we're going to try something new in the area. We're going to have a Vonerf by the splash pad. You'd probably read a little bit in the paper about it, but it's a new idea or at least for this area, it comes from the Netherlands, where you share the road. It's no curbs or gutters, no sidewalks. It's just we'll have some designated parking, but we're going to make that one way between Cherry Street, which is this street, and Main Street, and it will be pavers and snow melt, and we're going to incorporate a little park that we have across the street from the City Hall in with that, and with hopefully an ice rink in there, and so yeah, it'll be exciting. And then that whole street not the whole street, but most of the street, Elm Street, from Lincoln all the way to Main, will be one way. Something new for the city of Zeeland. And that's about it.
Very good, thank you. Right before members' comments, Rob, stand up. We just want to make sure that we know who you are, okay?
That's right. It was introduced last month, but it's good to give a refresher on that.
Yeah. Second month, right? All right, good. Any members' comments? Motion to adjourn? All those in favor, aye? Aye. Thank you.
And the hope is to give back to a study session next month. So if you could put on your calendar to convene at 11 o'clock over at Port Sheldon Township. And if I find that we're not at a point yet where we're ready to do that study session, we'll cancel it. But I would appreciate it if you would put down on your calendars together at 11, Port Sheldon Township.
Thanks, Steve.